Joey, I'm so glad to be sitting here with you.
And
Considering what I probably need to be doing, we are currently recording this at an evening time frame on Monday, September 9th. And for those of you who are unaware, there's a lovely storm that's brewing out in the Gulf that's going to be making its way to us here in lovely South Louisiana. And it'll be our first hurricane, Kaylee and I's first hurricane as homeowners. So, yay!
Yay. Well, to get your mind off of it, Brew History.
Home history. Oh,
this is what I can provide for you. I can offer you nothing in the way of help, nothing in the way of monetary financial assistance. But if you need a drink and you want to talk about history,
here we go.
Look, hey.
Isn't that why we started this
long, right?
Yeah, and that's why we started this thing, because we like to just talk about history ad nauseum and also drink
ad nauseum.
Quite
sometimes the two come together and it makes a pretty magical little experience. Magical. So this is a bit of it wasn't an afterthought. What's the thing? What's the thing I'm saying? What am I thinking of here? What's a change of gears? That's what it is.
That's true, because
we've been very busy with Market Garden.
All markets and all gardens, we've discussed them.
Yeah. And now the other anniversary that's happening right around this time of year, September 17th, 1862 here in the United States. There's only one battle to talk about, and it's the big one. It's the Battle of Antietam. And as you might be able to tell by this episode, if you can't beat them, Antietam. And to talk about Antietam, we've got on a really just great friend of mine, lives here in Franklin. It's John Banks of on Facebook. It's John Banks' Civil War blog. But John's also the author of Hidden History of Connecticut Union Soldiers, Connecticut Yankees at Antietam. And then his new one that's out is a Civil War road trip of a lifetime, which takes you to Antietam and Gettysburg and all the other little places that John goes. Because, I mean, if you keep up with him on his blog, the man's constantly somewhere. And now he's got a drone, so he's effectively unstoppable. Barriers, park lines, none of that means anything anymore. He's
land, sea, and air.
He also serves on the board for Save Historic Antietam Battlefield. So kind of want to give a shout out to them as well. And then too, another great podcast out there for you to listen to is the Antietam and Beyond Podcast with John and Tom McMillan. So without further ado, welcome to the show and to the stage, John Banks.
Bo and Joe. It's so tremendous to be here. Oh my goodness. This is awesome.
It's almost as if there's some divine power that put us all together to have similar names like Joe and Bo. We have been constantly misconstrued for brothers, to which I always say that at least I'm the handsome one.
There you go. That's beautiful.
Wrong-minded, but whatever. You know.
No, actually, Joe looks like Gardner Minshew. Now that he's relatively clean shaven.
I can take Gardner Minshew. I was kind of going for the Paul Skeens look, but
Paul Skeens too, who pitched at LSU, and since we have two, presumably both of you are Louisiana natives. Paul Skeens. I'm from Pittsburgh, by the way.
Okay,
so, two Pirates fans here. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Was the Jolly Roger come down yet?
Oh, I took it down already. It's done.
It's been another sad season, so unfortunately.
But June looked good.
It did.
Really good.
It did.
Get out of the All-Star break and they still look good. Come on, you couldn't tell me you weren't buying in just a little bit to this year. I was feeling it.
I was buying in. Of course, I grew up. I'm much older than you guys, and I grew up in Pittsburgh when the Pirates were really, 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 really good, and got a chance to see Roberto Clemente play back in the day, if you know, synonymous with Pirates and Baseball Hall of Famer and number 21 and all that stuff. And, you know, I was so hoping that Paul Skeens would lead the Pirates to the playoffs, and unfortunately that's not going to happen. So
gotta have bats.
Maybe
gotta have bats.
Totally.
Another year. But we didn't come here to talk about baseball. We came here to talk about Antietam. So John, how did you get interested in Antietam because of all the places that you could be, right? You're in Pittsburgh. You could very easily have gotten attached to, just driving a couple hours and being there in Gettysburg. You could have gotten really into the French and Indian War. And yet here you are fascinated with Antietam.
That's a good question, Joe. And of course, when you grow up in Pennsylvania, it is almost a rite of passage to go and visit Gettysburg. And I did that too as a kid, a long, long, long time ago with my parents and my two siblings. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. So Gettysburg, of course, when I was 12 years old, went there for the first time. My dad bought us a sleeve of bullets, and my siblings had no interest in that. Those bullets are behind me here in Nashville, somewhere on the shelf with a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, Gettysburg was definitely on my radar. A long, long, long time ago, my first journalism gig was in Martinsburg, West Virginia, which, as you both know, that was Virginia at the outbreak of the Civil War. I used to go over to the Antietam battlefield, didn't know anything about the relatively little about the fighting there, September 17th, 1862. Used to go over there, fairly regularly, got to know some of the people there. And I'm a huge schmoozer. I love schmoozing with people. And back
can attest. I've watched him schmooze.
Yeah, schmoozing. As I tell our two adult daughters, schmoozing is 98.6% of the life, and then the other 12%. I'm being Yogi Berra here. It's just total BS. But I used to go to the battlefield, and at the time, if your listeners know a little bit about the battle, one of the central places of fighting was the bloody cornfield at the northern end of the field, the Miller Farm, D.R. Miller Farm. And at the time, the bloody cornfield was not owned by the Park Service. It was before the Mellon Conservancy purchased the ground, and then eventually it became part of the park. Well, anyway, I got to know the family who lived in the Miller farmhouse, the Culler family. And they had been farming the property since the 1940s. Pretty amazing. Got to know them. And for the little paper that I worked for, the Martinsburg Journal, I wrote a story about Antietam. And as part of that, I went down there to interview the Cullers. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I pulled up in the driveway, it's still there. The house is still there, which dates to the battle. It's still there, part of the National Military Park now. As soon as I pulled up in the driveway, they had a table set up, one of those tables you unfold, and on it they had all these relics that they had found on the battlefield over the years, gun parts, bullets, et cetera. I was hooked. And for those of your listeners who have been to Gettysburg or Petersburg or Cold Harbor or whatever, Antietam is different in the fact that, like I always say, if a soldier could magically, from the Civil War, transport himself to 2024 and go to the battlefield today, it looks roughly the same. Take away the monuments, obviously, and some other modern intrusions, it looks like it did in 1862. So ever since that day that I went down there and visited with Paul Culler, and he showed me all the stuff, the relics that had come out of the ground at the Miller cornfield, the bloody cornfield, I was hooked. And then it just kind of went from there.
So John, for our listeners' sake, I guess what we could do is kind of give a little bit of precursor towards Antietam, like how is the war going, and why is Antietam so pivotal?
Well, I'll give you the real short version here. The war was not going well for the United States Army at this time.
Yeah.
This is, Lee makes a move north into Maryland. His hope was that Marylanders would acquiesce to the Confederate Army's presence there, that perhaps get some converts to the Confederate cause. They moved from Virginia up into Maryland. The Maryland campaign consisted of, battles besides Antietam. There was very important battle fought in the passes on South Mountain at Fox. Let me make sure I have all the gaps right here, Bo. Fox's Gap, Turner's Gap, and Crampton's Gap. Mm-hmm. That battle was fought 3 days before the Battle of Antietam, September 14th, 1862. And by the way, many, many visitors who go to Antietam are completely unaware of the fighting that took place, the very important fighting that took place 3 days before. Mm-hmm. So you have the Battle of South Mountain fought September 14th. You have the Battle of Antietam, September 17th. You have the Battle of Shepherdstown fought in Virginia, which is now West Virginia. That's fought on the 21st and the 22nd. Antietam, of course, led to one of the most important decisions that Lincoln made during the war, the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, which I believe was ratified January 1863. That came out, the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation is issued on September 22nd, 1862, my birthday, so I never forget that. So you have the very short version of this story, Bo, is things are not going well for the United States, the Union Army at this time. The Confederate Army and the Army of Northern Virginia has some momentum. They end up meeting at fighting on the banks of Antietam, by Antietam Creek on September 17th, 1862. That becomes the bloodiest day in American history, the bloodiest one-day battle of the Civil War, and more Americans died in battle at Antietam than any other battle that the U.S. armies have fought. It was roughly, I'm not really super good with statistics, and I'm not a right flank, left flank person, but roughly 3,300 die on September 17th, 1862. And then roughly that same number, perhaps a little bit more, die in the days and weeks afterward. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that answers your question in 2.5 minutes there. So
yeah.
The big major players, right? Because being the Westerner that I am at heart, the big major players are the ones that we always think about when we think of the Eastern Theater. So you've got Robert E. Lee in command of the Army of Northern Virginia, but then you've got George McClellan back in command of the Army of the Potomac, because he's been the guy and then he was not the guy, and now he's back in command for a little while. And it's always fun to talk about McClellan, and I don't know how we got to talking about him earlier today on the show, but this is the second time he's made his appearance today, so it's like Beetlejuice. If I say it one more time, he might just show up and be very presumptuous in the back of the room. And
yes,
Drew Gruber's gonna love hearing that.
Our friend Drew Gruber, Civil War Trails. We have a mutual friend there.
Oh, you mean Civil War Trails? Civil War Trails, who happens to sponsor the show. Civil War Trails, who brings you home Brew History. Wow, how about that?
They sponsor our podcast too. They sponsor our podcast. My goodness gracious, I didn't know that. How about that? That's awesome. Yeah.
Bo, I can't believe you let me go the entire episode with the Market Garden 80 logo up in the corner.
I was enthralled by the picture behind, so I didn't even pay attention to that.
Yeah. There it is. Look at that. Bam. Civil War Trails. Wow. Look at there.
That's fabulous.
Anyways, that was funny. But yeah, like Drew's a big McClellan guy. So what's going through the minds of, say, a Lee and a McClellan right around September 16, 17? What's going on? Because of course we know about the famous Lost Order and all this stuff, but what's really happening in the mindsets of these guys?
Well, it seems like McClellan, like many, many years ago, I read Landscape Turned Red by Stephen Sears. Mm-hmm. And for anybody looking for an intro into Antietam, it's a pretty good book, but and Sears is scathing regarding McClellan, and that if I've read that book probably sometime in the 80s, and he just tears McClellan, a new one there. He's not a fan. Recent scholarship has cast him, I think, in a more favorable light.
Mhm.
McClellan at the time, he's reorganizing the army. He was a great organizer. He's getting this army into fighting shape, and then all of a sudden, this Lee's making this incursion into Maryland, and he gets the recovery of the famous or infamous cigars with the plans are found by, I believe, 2 Indiana soldiers on the best farm not far from roughly Monocacy, Maryland. So McClellan ends up, he gets Lee's plans, and he makes some comment that, now I know how to whip Bobby Lee. And well, the reality is he really didn't whip Bobby Lee at Antietam on September 17th, 1862. What was going through Lee's mind? I think one of the things that's going through his mind is, man, I'm hurting, because he had fallen off his horse days before the battle, and his two hands were he was in pain. So some people have offered the opinion that might have been the reason that he did not fight the battle as well as he had might have. So anyway, the Army of Northern Virginia is outnumbered. Lee had split his army. Part of it's down at Harper's Ferry, roughly 16 miles away or so. They end up meeting in the farm fields and woodlots surrounding this little village in western Maryland called Sharpsburg, and the rest, Joe and Bo, is history. That's why we're here. So,
and you had mentioned something, and I've always just been curious about this too. There's seemingly an issue with some people in the historical community, which there are many problems.
There's issues in the historical community?
It's crazy. But there
First time ever hearing of this.
There are several.
You mean that people don't always don't always get along?
And they're not always nuanced either.
I'm stunned by this. This is a revelation. It's a revelation.
I'm quite shocked.
This is news to me. I'm just now hearing about this for the first time. Jesus. There's always seemingly some disgruntled folk who don't think it's the American army, it's the Union or the Yankees, and I don't know. That's been something that's so, I don't know, trivial to me.
You mean like when they yell in your face and they say, yeah, and you have to be like, well, it was the United States Army.
Yeah, and like what's on their belt?
76. Yeah,
I refer to it as the United States Army. I didn't always do that.
Yeah.
Do you guys? What do you think? I mean, what's your opinion?
I use U.S. Army. I use federal. I use those two kind of interchangeably.
Yeah.
A big thing for me though is like, I'm a writer at heart, and I can't use the same word 100 times.
I hear you.
So like, I can't just be like the Federal Army this, Federal Commander this, Federal troops did that.
Yeah.
So you're always searching for that other word, and like I usually run between the three. Union probably the least of the three.
Yeah.
Federal and U.S. are probably the most common, and then Union is like a last. Oh, I need another word here.
What do you call the Confederate Army?
Usually Confederate or rebel.
Yeah.
Same with me. I do too.
Yeah.
Is that contentious? Are you guys hearing?
I mean, I got yelled at one day for calling them the Federal Army, but
Who yelled at you? I'm curious.
a lady, just a guest at one of the sites,
Sure.
lost the line between me and 3 or 4 other people, and I was like, wow, I really feel strongly about this very
and
benign thing.
and anytime you go to the footnotes of a book, you can always find, that lady in particular who's a Civil War scholar.
Okay, that's interesting.
She was a teacher for 35 years, and by God, that qualified her to say what terminology should be what.
Well, I have found, I'm curious, and we may be getting off the beaten path here, but I'm just curious.
That's nothing new for this show.
Yeah. I have a Civil War Facebook page. I got some quite a number of followers, and there is nothing that I have found that I have to be. I'm not super vigilant about the comments on the page.
Mm-hmm.
I'd let people are going to have differing opinions from mine, and I get it, but just the level of contentiousness regarding stuff like this to me is often astounds me to see it.
Wait a second. You mean to tell me that the Civil War community can sometimes be contentious? Wow, I'm hearing this for the first time.
I'm saying ultra contentious. Ultra. Do you have like a breaking news banner that goes across the top here of your?
Oh, I can. You know what? Funny you say that. It's funny you say that.
Probably
John,
need one.
John, I think it's actually it derives from people who think they know a lot about the Civil War, but actually nothing.
Yes.
And they're like, it's not the Union Army. It's the I don't know.
Yeah.
People are finding me.
Totally, and I'm not like.
You mean like that?
Yeah, there you go. Breaking news. I love that. It's like I feel like I'm on. It's like CNN.
Right.
There you go. It's beautiful. But I'm curious. I'm just curious, Bo. Like you guys are historians, okay? And I'm not. I'm not a historian. I'm a journalist, okay? I'm a storyteller, and I'm. To get your perspective on this it's interesting to me. I've talked a lot, a whole slew of historians over the years about the Civil War and their viewpoints on it. But I'm just, perhaps it's the political climate that we live in, and we don't need to get into that, nor do I expect us to. But maybe that exacerbates that whole issue. So I'm sorry to steer you off Antietam. I apologize.
No, but you do bring up a good point, because we're seeing it not only in the Civil War community, but we're also now starting to see it more so grow in the World War II field.
Really,
we've just been talking about not too long ago that there's a particular, to put it kindly, a jackass who went on a particular talk show that wasn't homebrew history. But,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So. And said that Churchill was he was the number one boogeyman, and we're just like, okay,
fine.
Yeah, clearly something is off in our public education system.
Spot on. You're totally
I'm just going to keep
right.
making banners, apparently. That's going to be my role for the show.
You're always banner man.
I love it. I got to incorporate this into the Antietam. We just go audio on the Antietam and Beyond podcast.
Yeah.
But if we ever do video, I'm going to have to steal that. So
I can't tell you how angry I was about the Winston Churchill thing. I was seething for 3 days. I called him just irate, but
yes,
trying to bring us back to our topic, because this is what I'm actually supposed to do.
Sure.
I'm not only the banner man, but I'm the topic keeper. This is where we live.
He wears hats.
I got to be useful once in my life. Other than that, I'm just out here disappointing people.
Right.
But when we start talking about, this is where I think terminology is important, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is the greatest single conflict to ever reach our nation, right?
Yes.
Nothing has ever done this to us before. Nothing, hopefully, will ever do this to us again. But I think when we talk about the Civil War, we have to understand that one side was right and the other side was wrong. And one side was fighting to save the Union and to uphold the United States and the Constitution. And the other one was either trying to leave it or destroy it. So when we get the names wrong, it's a matter, I guess, of your perspective. But in 1862, when these men are out fighting in the field. Why have so many of them gone off to war? Because I can tell you what it's like for some of these soldiers in 1864.
Yeah.
Particularly for the federal soldiers. You look at those guys who signed up in 61, they volunteered because they saw secession as treason. They saw secession as unconstitutional. They saw the dissolution of the Union as essentially Armageddon. And then, of course, you've got men who were in the ranks who were abolitionists from the outset, and they saw this as the perfect opportunity to try and end slavery in the United States. So you've got both of those going, and I can show you that in 64. But what's the mindset like within the Army of the Potomac in 1862?
In my opinion, they want to save the Union, and I think that's, I haven't read every single letter, obviously, but I've read quite a few, and I think from my standpoint, saving the Union was the predominant issue among United States Army soldiers, Army of the Potomac soldiers. What do you think? Is that wrong?
I think it's right for 62, but by 63 things start to change, and I think the social and the political. We're talking about the political climate influencing our attitudes and stuff today. The social and political climate in 63 changes. Emancipation goes into effect, and now this is an army that is an army of emancipators, not to steal from Elizabeth Varron, an army of deliverance, but that's what they become.
Yes.
Whether or not they all want to be or not, because you and I have a mutual friend, and my boss, your friend Eric Jacobson. Eric will tell you, there's racism and bigotry in the North just as much as there's racism and bigotry in the South. But there's a difference between not liking a black person in Minnesota and owning them in Mississippi.
Yes.
So you've got these two worlds, two societies at odds with one another, and you end up on the banks of the Antietam Creek on September the 17th of 1862, locked in combat for 12 hours, 13 hours?
It starts roughly at really, the battle began the night before. There was sharp skirmishing and fighting in the East Woods on September 16th. So really, if you want to get technical, it was a 2-day battle, really, and it lasts until roughly 5 o'clock. At the southern end of the field, which is my favorite end of the field, by the way, the 40-acre cornfield. It was Joseph Sherrick's 40-acre cornfield. It's commonly called John Otto's, but it was Joseph Sherrick's 40-acre cornfield. So yeah, I mean, what I'm really into, Joe and Bo. You ought to call it the Joe and Bo show. That would kind of rhyme. I think that would be kind of cool. But what I'm really into, like when to kind of give you more sense where I'm coming from, is when we moved from Dallas. I worked at Dallas Morning News for a really long time, and then we moved. I took a job at ESPN in Connecticut. We lived in Avon, Connecticut. When we moved up there, I had I knew very little about Connecticut's service during the Civil War. It was like peeling back layers of an onion. Okay, there were 4 regiments of Connecticut soldiers, the 8th, 11th, 14th, and 16th, who fought at Antietam. What fascinated me was what I call the micro history, the individual stories of the soldiers. And what I did, I ran the NFL coverage on ESPN.com for roughly a decade. And on my days off, I relished my days off. I mean, I could not wait. And my days off they were strange. I was off on Saturdays. I was off, and maybe Wednesday I would take off too. What I would do is I would go to archives and historical societies, and I would go through cemeteries and really dig deeper into the individual stories of soldiers. To me, that it was just, the micro history to me of these people and what happened to them during the battle. And then I'd love to follow what happened to them afterward, which is so fascinating to me. And, like I was saying earlier, these people were had a mix of beliefs. In New England, Connecticut, there's a tendency that more of them were supporters of, abolition than, say, some farmer perhaps from Iowa or Minnesota or Ohio. So yeah, that's where my interest lies as far as, Antietam. I'm not a right flank, left flank type person, although I can talk about that. But anyway, does that make sense? I'm sorry to get off the beaten path.
Yeah.
We love going off the beaten path. It's actually should be the subtitle of the show, Brew History, Off the Beaten Path.
Good. Because I have here in my office, Joe and Bo, I have a modest Civil War collection. I need to start paring it back. So maybe we'll use this. If you have me on again, maybe we can hold an auction. But I have
we can go live from this.
I've got some really cool Antietam stuff. Like I collect soldier images. I have off on this wall, I have an original Alexander Gardner image of Burnside Bridge from his sketchbook. It's beautifully framed. I'm staring at it right there. But I also have some letters from Antietam from Jacob Bauer, who was in the 16th Connecticut, to his wife Emily, a back and forth correspondence in the aftermath of Antietam. And I got these at like a flea market in Bristol, Connecticut, where ESPN is located. This guy called me and said, "Hey, I have these letters. Would you be interested?" And then as soon as I looked at them, I was like, I got to have these. I got them for a very modest price. And it was so fascinating because Emily's writing to Jacob, who was in the 16th Connecticut, fought in the 40-acre cornfield. He survives. In the 16th Connecticut, that was its first battle on September 17th, 1862. But this letter is so heartrending. And Emily writes to Jacob and says, and I'm paraphrasing here, the bodies are coming up from Antietam. Wadsworth Washburn, who was a sergeant in the 16th Connecticut, his body is going to come up soon. And then she just mentioned some of these other soldiers who Jacob apparently knew, and who, through my research, I felt like a certain kinship with these people. And to me, when you read these letters and then you go and walk the battlefield, it has a much deeper meaning for you. And every time I go to Antietam now, you see people there. Sometimes people don't get out of their cars. Okay. And they have a tremendous park road. It's been there since, the 1890s and it's great. But if you really want to understand this battle, you have to get out and walk the field. And when I walk the field, I'm not seeing, the 14th Connecticut oblique at 234 and enfiladed the Bloody Lane, blah, blah, blah. I'm seeing names and in some cases I'm seeing faces, when I walk the ground. It's holy ground to me. It really is. It's hallowed ground. It's very special. So
it gets to become what Chamberlain wanted, like at Gettysburg, division place of souls, a place where you can go and commune. You say it sounds strange.
Totally.
Commune with the spirits, commune with the armies that were there.
Absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You and I know, we've walked around the battlefield at Franklin together.
Yes.
I have the same kind of perception of Franklin, is that, I know where all the regiments are. And I can do a regular battlefield tour as, 50th Ohio was right over there. But there is something really incredible about standing where that regiment was and knowing that, you're reading the account of Erastus Winters or of Asa Weston, and you could put together what they were seeing and what they were feeling. It's the same thing when you go to a place like the Mule Shoe at Spotsylvania, and you read about some of those guys in Gordon's formations, and you can read about Emory Upton and the soldiers that make that incredible attack. It's not just about seeing and getting their perspective, but you can capture the mood. You can capture the feeling, the entire gravity of the situation for that individual. It's almost like it transmits itself through the ground to you.
Absolutely.
I don't know
Absolutely.
a better way to describe it. It's an electrical feeling.
It really is. It's, I've been in Antietam all seasons, all different months. I've been there in February and walked Miller's Cornfield by myself. I've been there deep into the summer. I've been there on the anniversary at 5:30 in the morning, walking Miller's Cornfield at the exact time. I've been there when Hood's men, they're having coffee behind the Dunker Church, and Jackson says, "You're going in," and these guys are all pissed off and because they hadn't eaten for a day and a half or whatever, and they go into battle. But what's also fascinating to me about Antietam is the fact that Antietam was the first. Gardner goes there in the days after the battle along with James Gibson, photographers for Matthew Brady, and they take these incredible images of the dead of Antietam, mostly Confederate dead, in Bloody Lane, along the Hagerstown Pike, and elsewhere. And because some of the landmarks, because of William Frassanito's book, Antietam, Bloodiest Day, Antietam, America's Bloodiest Day. It's a remarkable book. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with it. If they're not, they should be. But William Frassanito is the father of Civil War, identifying where Civil War images took place based on the landscape. And he did this in the era of pre-digital era. Went to the Library of Congress, did this amazing research. He was up. Yeah, I have, Joe, 3 copies of that. One signed by Bill, he's a genius. He's a genius. He really is. And using that book really lit
just for some idea of what it can do, right?
Bingo.
Yeah.
That book really, he did such a remarkable job, and it's not like a technical book of about photography. It's a history book in which he weaves in the stories of these soldiers from both sides who fought there. It's just that's another reason why, to me, Antietam is so special. I've taken that dog-eared copy of that book to that battlefield so many times. I'm getting so excited over this now. I'm probably talking too much.
No, there's no such thing on here. But I can imagine that, it because this is, like you said, it's one of the first instances where we have, descriptive photography.
Yes.
And it absolutely revolutionizes, sort of war correspondences.
Totally.
People always think, okay, yeah, people die in conflict. That's what war is. But then when you Jesus, that's funny. That's funny.
Homebrew history allows guests to talk too much. For now, I'm gagging myself. I'm not saying a word the rest of this podcast. I'm shutting up. I'm not going to say. Well, I can't. I'm almost done with whatever I'm drinking. It's like old wine. I think I've had around for a couple of years. No, the other thing, Bo, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bo.
No, go ahead.
Those images that Gardner took were exhibited in Brady's Gallery on Broadway in New York. And if your listeners get a chance, Google Brady Gallery in Antietam, and the New York Times correspondent who went there and saw the reaction of the people who went through the gallery of these images. It's one of the most fabulous pieces of writing and so descriptive. These images of the dead of Antietam were astounding. These weren't the woodcut illustrations that you would see in Harper's Weekly. These were these were real people, real dead people, dead soldiers on the battlefield. And, I view these images hundreds, thousands of times. And I have to caution myself sometimes to always remember, this is humanity here. Okay. This is not
Mm-hmm.
You know, we cannot become, we have to realize that these are real people here, and we can't become, and you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
They can't just become figures or
Yeah,
images.
they can't.
Imaginary.
They
they're
can't.
real.
Because then we're doing it. We're dishonoring the memory of these people, and you know, the vast majority, we have no idea who these people are, who are in these images, these bodies. So, yeah.
So the thing that's always kind of struck me about it is when you read that, because I think I know the Times piece that you're mentioning, right?
Yeah.
When you read it, you get a real sense that for the first time as a nation, we understand.
Yes.
Like Antietam was kind of a warning, right? Or excuse me, Shiloh was kind of a warning.
Yes.
Okay, you know, 2 days, 23,000 casualties. You know, it kind of makes us go, there's something to this. But then Antietam, to see the dead, to know, you know, the position at the sunken road, or to see the dead in front of Dunker Church with the, you know, the cannons and equipment left behind.
Yes.
It tells you for the first time, I think, as a nation, that there is no innocence in this. There is no glory. There is no beauty. War is hell. This is hell, and you're in it. You know, not to sound like the Christmas Vacation, Clark Griswold. What do you mean we're in the thresholds of hell? But
yeah,
we were, as a nation. We were.
I hear you. I hear you, and that's why, you know, when I read comments on my Civil War Facebook page, and it's almost, you know, when people go to these places, they go, oh, it's so beautiful. And like, I was at Gettysburg a couple of weeks ago, and I'm up on Little Round Top, and I'm taking these, you know, I felt so blessed to be there and see the sunset over, you know, the mountain range in the distance. And the place it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. Okay. But then you realize it's why you're here, you know? Yeah. And Antietam to me is, it's the same thing. This place is so beautiful, but on September 17th, this 1862 was, as you know, the title of Sears's book, a landscape turned red. A soldier made a comment that the landscape seemed to turn red, and we have to realize that there is zero glory in war. And many of the comments, again, on my Civil War Facebook page, you know, seem to have that sense, but there's zero glory in this. None. People died. A lot of people died. According to,
be brave, and you can be heroic, and you can have honor and gallantry, but that only goes so far.
Totally.
You know,
totally.
So we know, of course, naturally, that the fighting goes on all day long, and, and you know, neither side can really come away with the win, right? And
yes,
you know, there's a certain aggression, I think, that gets shown for the first time, really, between Lee and McClellan's armies.
Yeah.
But then it's over, and Lee sticks around another day, kind of waiting on McClellan, see what happens, and then eventually starts his withdrawal back down into Virginia. And McClellan's in. Drew will be pleased with me. Drew of Civil War Trails, who happens to sponsor Brew History.
I thought we were the only one.
Did you know? Right? But be happy to know that I'm going to say that McClellan actually goes in pursuit of Lee.
He does.
To chase Lee. But what I think, and you alluded to this earlier, what happens 5 days later, you know, that's Antietam's largest kind of legacy, its biggest touch on Civil War history, is that it provides Abraham Lincoln with an opportunity to announce the Preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, a draft of which he'd carried in his pocket since June.
Correct.
Waiting. And now he's got that opportunity. So when you think about, yes, there is no glory, there is no honor, there is no gallantry, but sometimes the means are secured to get to that end. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think Lincoln was I think
you can say amazing genius.
No, he was far. Lincoln was far from perfect, but he was a perfect man for the time.
Yeah.
And you know, I've deep admiration for the man. And you know, I kind of, back when when I worked at the Dallas Morning News, and we used to we had a sports writer there. I'll get to my point in a second. And we used to talk over beers and whatever, and he made the point to me that stop guiding up these athletes. They're just human beings. And I think you can transfer that thinking to Lincoln too. All right, he wasn't a god, he wasn't a perfect person, but I think he was a perfect man for his time. And there's still people today who revile him, and but that's not me. He was a perfect man for his time, and I don't think any other politician of his time could have pulled off what Lincoln did, during that time frame. So,
and people give him, all the time, and I'm like, you guys do realize that this man, with the help of plenty others, but essentially helped save the Union.
Absolutely,
this would be a completely different story.
Can you imagine? And we're talking about him. Can you imagine if George McClellan won the election in 1864?
Yeah.
Just
no. And is there? By the way, you guys, is there a good book out on the 1864 election? Because if there is, I'd like to read it. And Joe is reaching back into his huge bookcase.
All of my books are currently seemingly in storage because we literally just bought this house in signed papers in June, and finally got everything moved out of our old apartment at the end of it. So we're still, and then as soon as that happens, we go back to school and teaching. So and unfortunately, I lost two bookcases in the move because they were just.
Oh no, I'm not happy, Bo. If I'm not around books, I've got over my right shoulder here, whole bunch of really good ones, regimental histories.
You would mention something that I also find to be sort of the future of historiography. Is we don't need another book on Gettysburg. We don't need another book on Manassas. What we do need is those micro histories, those family histories.
Totally.
It definitely will fill in the gaps that we're missing.
Has to be interesting though. And who's really good at these? And he's a friend of mine, Ron Coddington, who's a photo collector. And he's the publisher of Military Images magazine. Great magazine. It's the best smelling magazine I've ever had. The way it's packaged. When I go get my hair cut, I always turn to the woman cutting my hair. I go, "Here, you want to smell my magazine?" And it's the greatest smelling magazine of all time. But he has written 3 or 4 books. Faces of Blue. They're fabulous. Micro histories on these soldiers. So
there is a great book on the election of 1864. I don't have my copy on this desk because it's on my desk at my office at Carter.
Okay.
But it's Re-electing Lincoln, the Battle for the 1864 Presidency by John Waugh.
I got to get that. Waugh. Yeah, I recognize the name. Hey, Joe and Bo, can I give a shout out to the Battle of Shepherdstown?
Of course.
Yeah, why not?
Is that all right? The Maryland campaign did not end with the Battle of Antietam. And the Shepherdstown, West Virginia, one of my favorite places, was, of course, as I mentioned earlier, it was Virginia in 1862. So Lee goes and retreats across the Potomac River. Essentially, the Potomac River at that time was the demarcation between 2 countries. Think of it that way. And, there's a school of thought that, McClellan had a case of the slows after Antietam. But he pursued Lee. And there's this battle fought September 21st, 1862, and some of the 20th, Battle of Shepherdstown, in which one of my favorite regiments, the 118th Pennsylvania, fought outside Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And if your listeners go there, you can still go along the Potomac River and River Road, and you go down Trough Road, and you can still see the old cement mill kilns that were there in 1862. But it was a nasty little fight. The United States Army got got it handed to them, and then of course the campaign ends. But it is a fascinating battle. Some of it, a good chunk of the ground was going to be developed for housing. Fortunately, it was saved. I believe soon it's going to be open to the public. There also is a house back on the battlefield called the Osborne House, which has a artillery shell embedded there. But it's fascinating terrain. And the story of the 118th Pennsylvania, I have the regimental history signed by the author behind me. What their first battle of the war and what they went through is just a fascinating story. So shout out the Battle of Shepherdstown.
Battlefield reclamation and battlefield preservation
Yes.
is on this show. And, we're all huge advocates of walking the ground, so to speak, because I tell this to my students all the time. My guys, you can read ad nauseum about anything, but until you see it, until you have your own feet on the ground, you really can't experience it. And Joey and I's, friendship was, forged on an old Civil War battlefield. I think I first met Joey at Port Hudson. Because,
Walking around Fort Babcock, that'll teach you something about fortifications. It'll teach you something about fighting an entire army in the middle of the summer, inundated with mosquitoes, inundated with humidity. It's hot. And all of a sudden, dig in. Also, by the way, dig into the side of this hill, and make space for you to lay down behind it, because it's also going to be where you sleep.
Right, and that in its own right is, it's unique and it's beautiful in its own right, but it's also macabre because you realize, the desperation, the death and destruction that has occurred on the very ground that you're, now stepping on, and, presumably
it looks great with monuments on it, and it draws your mind away from the awful, terrible. And I think that is one of the problems, right?
Yes.
You can go to these battlefields and you're lured into going, wow, that's beautiful. And then, but I also think for a second, maybe that's the reward in it, right? Is that land had to be purged. It had to go through that awful crucible, and now here it is on the other side, and it gets to be beautiful, and we get to appreciate its beauty.
Yes.
While at the same time thinking about what happened there. And as long as you keep that last part in mind,
yes,
it does the job that it's always supposed to do, which, to quote it again, vision places souls, right? That's where generations who know not of us and we know not of will come to ask and to think and to ponder. And we get a chance to do that on the battlefields of the Civil War.
You guys know Ed Bars,
Yep.
retired, who died a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I have such deep admiration for Ed. I've met him a couple times. He used to speak up at our Connecticut Civil War Roundtable up in Torrington, Connecticut, where John Brown was born, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see where the foundation stones for where the house where John was born, the abolitionist / fanatic / whatever. But Ed, I'm hoping, first of all, I hope I live as long as Ed. And if I do, I want to be walking battlefields like he did.
Mm-hmm.
Back well into his 80s, and with such energy and vigor and deep interest in telling these stories. And he always used to say that you want to understand a battle, you got to walk the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And, I walk the ground as often as I can. So, yeah.
We talk about how our show's got a great UK followership and everything, but
Awesome.
you and I got to spend some time with Coylin, and he got to walk the ground in the
Irishman.
The Irishman.
The Irishman.
Battlefields. He got to, and two, for him, when I got my hands on him, we went down and did Patrick Claiborne themed day for him. But it's that really cool way to be able to connect yourself to the ground, connect your own story to the place, and that's why it's always so great to get out on civil.
Totally. It's like I tell my wife, it's like I have met so many interesting people doing this. Okay. And have made new friends, and, everybody, and I'm not kidding you. I had breakfast at Bonnie's at the Redbird in Keedysville, Maryland, which is down the road from Antietam. It's this country restaurant. I had breakfast there with a a retired CIA station chief who worked the Rome bureau for the CIA, and he had a 16th Connecticut ancestor who fought at Antietam. And I'm, in quote unquote real life, I'm not hanging around with anybody from the CIA, but because we had a common bond, the Civil War, we connected. But here's the deal: over our breakfast of scrambled eggs and coffee and whatever, I started talking about the Kennedy assassination, and he got a little squirrely on me, and I'm not. I want to let you know, I am not a run-of-the-mill Kennedy assassination guy. Okay, I mean, I know my stuff. So he got on me. Never heard again. So
I think we're going to have John back on in November.
Shit. I mean, because I'm actually genuinely curious about what you have to think on that, John.
Jeez,
it's got to be another night. It's got to be another night. We got to do Antietam, guys. Yeah. It's Antietam. I'm trying in vain.
I'll do the Kennedy assassination with you. When I was a kid growing up in Pittsburgh, I was probably 14, and I know we might be short on time here. I was like 14 years old, and I called into the talk show, KDKA, and Arlen Specter was on, the father of the single bullet theory. And I'm like 14 years old, but I knew my stuff. All right. I'm a rockhead about a lot of stuff, but this, I know my stuff. Okay. And I was quote unquote debating him about the single bullet theory. He's a father of single bullet theory. And we had a lively discussion. I could still see it. I was using my parents' phone. No cell phones then. Using my parents' phone up in their bedroom, talking to Arlen Specter on KDK radio. So that's for another show, though. So
yeah,
there you go.
All right, one last thing on Antietam, John.
Okay.
What should it be?
I would say that there's a fabulous preservation organization called Save Historic Antietam Foundation. I've been on the years. Nobody who's on the board gets paid. We all do this because of our deep love of the battlefield. If your listeners want to go online, they can go. I think it's SHAF, SHAF.org, or there's a Facebook page, Save Historic Antietam Foundation Facebook page. And I also would say, if you go to the battlefield, don't. The first stop is the visitor center, and then people drive around. I would highly, highly encourage people that if you're going to visit Antietam, read up about it before you go, and then get out of your car or your SUV or your truck and go walk the ground.
But do I have to read D. Scott Hartwig's Bullet Stopper? Can I read something else?
It's my computer is right on top of it, right here.
Of course it is, because it's perfect for elevating things.
Yeah. Scott has written the ultimate book, but it's going to take me a while to get through it. So,
Bo, you want to do some boohickey?
Boohickey, yeah. So, John, obviously, when it comes to the American Civil War, when it comes to almost any historical event ever, there's always going to be something that people either misconstrue, or through popular narrative have created a false image, have created some sort of false narrative of a particular thing. This is your opportunity to sort of explain the worst of the worst. Like what is it about the mythos of Antietam that bothers you, that you want to dispel?
Yeah, I think I'd circle it back to McClellan. He has this reputation of being he had the slows and he didn't know what he was doing. And I would argue that he was a great organizer who Antietam was a Union victory, a U.S. Army victory in my mind. Mm-hmm. And what he accomplished at that point in the war, I think he's gotten a bad rap. I would encourage your listeners to dig a little deeper on McClellan. I don't think he was the the bad general that most of the people that the common belief that of most people that he was this bad general. I don't think that's the case. So
now, do you think it's because enough time has passed that we've had time to kind of go back and reflect on McClellan's leadership? That's kind of given light.
I think that's an apt description, Bo. I think it's just like with Grant. Like Grant had this huge this reputation of being this heavy drinking, general whose presidency was a big zero as a president. But I think recent scholarship by Ron Chernow among others has I think debunked that. And I think his reputation has been rehabilitated, just as I suspect 10 years from now, we may have a different opinion of McClellan. And I think that's the way history works. It's not static. As more information comes to light, digitized or otherwise, or we get people, like yourselves, like you two guys, really digging in on a topic, and others, I think, I think we're continually finding new and different information about people. So anyway, hopefully that's my take, and I'm sticking with it. So.
Which is why it makes me laugh when people say they're trying to rewrite our history.
Yeah, I hate revisionists.
That gets me fired up.
I'm like,
spot on.
I'm like, at one point in time, we thought the Earth was the center of the universe.
Totally.
That wasn't true.
Yes.
Was that revisionist science or what?
Yeah. At some point, I'd love to talk monuments with you guys because I have a.
You have to follow the science. Remember that?
Yeah. That'll be a contention. Well, now, presumably, I think you guys were kind of like-minded on many things, I suspect, but there's nothing. That's another topic that is sure to gets people fired up. That and the beavers in the Valley of Death at Plum Run.
Oh, leave the beavers be. Well, now it's time for personal favorite segment, because I've been sipping on something the whole show. Yeah. John, you've picked it up, you've shown us a couple times, but what are you drinking? What is in you?
This is some old wine. I have no idea what it's called. I am a big Cabernet fan. And I polished off another bottle, not all at once, the other day. And I think my eldest daughter, Jessie, give her a shout out. And I have another daughter, Emmy, another shout out. I think she got me this, and this is the last sips of that bottle. So I'm gonna enjoy it. What are you guys drinking?
How about you, Bo?
So I am drinking a wonderful chilled glass of Crown Apple. Light.
That's
all tremendous. Right. I've been waiting the whole show for this.
I'm interested.
I've been waiting all day.
What Dead Man Brew Up.
There we go. Homebrew history. I love it.
The man only can drink during the week, and I got a fix. I've been stuck on this for a good week and a half now. Thanks to Drew Gruber of Civil War Trails, who, by the way, did you know, homebrew history? I think that we're just going to set a record for how many times we could say it.
If you didn't know.
But Drew, when we got together for the Emerging Civil War Symposium, we went back to the cabin. Me, him, Richard Lewis were sitting around. He goes, "Let me make you a Pimm's cup." And I haven't had a Pimm's cup since Bo, you and I were in school, and
I think we lived together.
Yeah, and man, he fixed it up, and it was perfect, lit up the world. So I got back home, looked up the best recipe for a Pimm's cup, and I've been making one or two a night for the last couple of days. And I've already put a fair dent into that bottle of Pimm's, but I have not the Pimm's cup, but the Pimm's jug, because why anything worth doing is worth overdoing. So there we go.
You boys are living the dream, man. Living the dream.
That's what they tell me.
I love it. It's tremendous.
It's a dream. I don't know if it was mine, but it is a dream.
I love it. It's awesome.
Nightmares are considered dreams.
There we go. Beautiful.
There we go.
Beautiful.
John, this has been fantastic.
Awesome.
Bo, always a treat, and this was a late time episode. So all those people that would go, "Oh, Brew History's gotten so stiff upper lipped. All they do is talk during the day now. And well, you know what? Here we go. Some of those lucid thoughts for you.
It's awesome. I'm telling you, like we have to do like a homebrew after hours or a homebrew after dark. We may have to charge admission to that.
I'm totally in for that. Invite me back. I'd love to be on. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, John, we gotta have you back about JFK because, dude,
we need to also pitch real quick too. You know, you've got your book out there.
Yes,
a road trip of a Civil War lifetime.
A Civil War road trip of a lifetime. I'll be speaking at the Antietam Institute. I believe it's September 27th. It's a Friday, whatever that Friday is, at the end of September. And then I'll be at the Center for Civil War Photography event in early October in Gettysburg. And also in November, I'll be speaking at 3 consecutive roundtables: Kingsport, Cooksville, and Knoxville. If anybody just goes to my blog, John Banks' Civil War blog, you can see a schedule there. So,
yeah. All right. Good deal, guys.
Awesome.
This has been good. Let's take it to the end credits.
Cheers, folks.
Thank you. Take care.